What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here. Jim to my right. Across from us, we have Scott Parks and Mr. Joe from our engineering department. We have 10 minutes-ish to talk about, all about, zero stops, Jim.
Mostly about, a little bit about. If you ask Joe, who is actually an engineer who works on projects like this, he's probably like, "Oh yeah, we're not even scratching the surface."
Yeah, we're gonna we're gonna dip into zero stops here.
Right.
On the table beside us, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a smattering, quite a few rifle scopes here that have zero stops. Some similar, some different, some old, some new. We've got kind of like a historic zero stop past. When I started at Vortex, Scott, probably same for you, Jim. I don't think we had a scope that had any sort of zero stop. The original PSTs were in development. The original Razor HD 520x50 didn't exist yet, and now look, all sorts of them.
There's a lot here now.
I'd also say about that time frame, we're locked. Well, that's probably about
2010,
2009, 10-ish.
Yeah. I think the 520 came out in the end of 2009, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of the stuff, like the world I came from, predominantly a hunting background. I mean, cap turrets. Once you got, just hunting, Scott again. Once you got a zero, it was like no touchy, hands off, like black magic. Like, I do not want to ruin this. Like the thought of like dialing your turret and screwing that up, like fear factor 12, right? But you also think about that time frame too. Rangefinders were really just, somewhat in their infancy. Like, they hadn't been around an incredibly long time. A lot of archery guys were using it. Rifle guys are like, what do I need? I'm just going to, shoot. I don't necessarily need a rangefinder. Ballistic calculators on your phone weren't a thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of things have progressed over time, along with our selection of these fine rifle scopes that all feature some fashion of zero stop.
That's right. So, Mark, you have a piece of paper with questions on it.
As per usual.
Yes.
So, question one, what is a zero stop? Why do we have them?
So, essentially, it's just a stop at where your rifle is zeroed. Funny enough, we found over time that a lot of users, including myself, don't exactly want the turret to stop at zero. We want to have it a little bit below.
That was my second question.
Well, I'll lead into it then. So the reason being, at least for me, is if I'm like at a match or just doing load development or something and the round is impacting below my zero, a tenth or two, or a quarter MOA or half MOA, I don't want to have to totally reset the turret. I just want to zero it real quick. So that allows me to just dial below zero, a few clicks, and then I can, adjust my point of aim without having to take out any tools or
right.
whatnot.
The biggest thing you want it to be is consistent, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I should point out, too, so for those who are still not quite familiar with zero stops at this point, we're talking solely about the elevation turret because gravity only works in one direction. That's what our elevation turret is really helping us out with a lot. And so, once we've got that zero figured out elevation-wise, we don't really have to worry about gravity ever kind of flipping the switch on us and going the other way. We're only ever going to dial in one direction. So we can kind of just limit out the rest of the travel in the other direction. And then we can have sort of a consistent stop at or somewhere very near in a consistent spot right near the zero. So you can be dialing out to 1,000 plus, whatever it is, and then you just, crank, boom, stop. Okay, I'm back to my zero just like that.
Right. Now it helps you keep, track of your zero too, so you don't inadvertently, dial a turn below or something like that. Actually, case in point, Jim.
I've actually done that a couple times.
I've done that. I was shooting an HSLR 6-24, still a scope I love quite a bit. I was on an aoudad hunt. I was hastily getting a zero because I'd switched rifles at the last minute.
Super smart thing to do.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's what you want to do before a match or any big hunt.
And you probably didn't have any shims on you.
So I think I had them with me, but I was like, you know what, I'll be fine. I'm just going to, do this real quick, and off I go. Talking during the sighting process, got a beautiful zero. The gun was shooting phenomenally, and forgot that I had dialed back to zero. Redialed back to zero, putting me 24 MOA below my zero within it's like the first 5 minutes of the hunt. We crest this ridge, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a big one. Like, seriously, like to this day, like a giant, like plus 30-inch, like heavy horned, aoudad, 200 yards. And I'm like, this hunt's going to be over in 5 minutes. And I line up and I'm like, miss, he runs away. You know, I didn't take a second shot. I found that quite curious. You know, I feel like I'm capable of making that shot. A lot of question marks, went back. I'm like, well, I got to go check my zero. I'm not even on paper. Dialed up that 24 MOA and bullseye. So
that's how it goes. Your spotters over there like, yeah, you're going to have to come up 24.
Right. You're going to have to come up 24 MOA at 200 yards.
Yeah.
Ironically, it's exactly 24 MOA.
Yeah.
Weird.
Exactly. Weird. So anyway, I guess that's a case of what can happen if you don't do your stuff correctly.
So, Joe, you get the opportunity to work on some of these systems that we have in front of us. Now, this is the thing where we were talking about, you know, we're only going to be scratching the surface. There's only so much we can go into with you as an engineer without us having to worry about being a little careful about giving some of the, some of the goods away or stepping on toes, whatever. But, you know, one of the things I always think of is when you guys engineer these things, the packaging of it has to be, I mean, that's quite a chore to come up with you already have a turret that's performing a very precise task. It has to dial in very precise increments, whether that's quarter MOA, even eighth MOA, maybe it's 0.1 mil. And then on top of that, now we're going to put in this mechanism that actually you as the user are able to go in, unlock as you set your zero. It is nice to be able to, I don't know of any zero stops that don't let you unlock them before you get going. You should be able to, or disengage them in some manner because you don't know where you're going to be zeroed at first. But then you set that stop in place and then you're able to use the turret as it was normally intended from there. I mean, the mechanical engineering side of things has to be rather involved, right?
It's fun. It's fun, and it is honestly very fun. It's a cool puzzle. Each one of the zero stop designs you have in front of you have something a little bit unique about them, and it is a cool. And one of the most important things you forgot is reliability and durability of that. It's
because as every engineering student in college knows, you can go on SolidWorks and make anything you want. You can. The sky's the limit there, and then you take it over to the machinist, and they look at you like they want to kill you.
Yes, might have gotten that look.
It's a love-hate relationship between engineers and machinists. Definitely.
Yeah, seemingly so.
Yep.
But I mean, is some of those examples that you bring up, Joe, I mean, what do we have here? This is kind of a very basic form of zero stop. We even call these almost like a zero limiter.
Rotational
stop.
It's the CRS, Jim. It's the customizable rotational stop.
Thank you, Mr. Copywriter from back in the day. So what I'm holding here is actually a series of little C-shaped brass shims that would go along with that original PST like you were talking about, still the HSLR and the HST. But yeah, so like Joe, for example, what is that thing? What do those things do?
So for this, basically what you're doing is you're preventing the turret screw from translating all the way down in a certain direction. So just think of them as
spacer.
Just spacer. It's really all it is, but very simple, but very effective. It'll get the job done for sure, and reliable. I mean, if it's properly installed and maintained, it's not nothing's going to happen to it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, with those you tuck opposingly, I guess, you know, underneath the elevation turret, stack them like that until you fill that gap, and then, like you said, when you come back home, oftentimes it stops, you know, generally a little bit below your 0.2, which actually could be an advantage. So
usually that's what we would recommend. I know, like with this one, for example. So when you get into the other more, I'd say, advanced rifle scopes, long range rifle scopes, you can set a more exact zero stop and like a legitimate like bam hard stop. These, like Scott said, they're more of a spacer, so we've always suggested you go a little bit below because sometimes it could go one click beyond where you set it, or, you know, maybe depending on how those shims are stacked a little bit. But it's more like a soft prevention of you going beyond a certain rotation. But
each one of those clicks, to kind of put it in perspective, we're talking about in the order of microns as far as translational distance. So that kind of accounts for that little bit of variance that you'll see there.
That's one thing I think a lot of people actually fail to realize, and it's not their fault. So maybe fail is a bit of a harsh word, but people don't always realize, I think. So your turrets, they're actually they're screws. And when they move, you go in and you dial your elevation, for example, and if you are watching through the scope, you can see the reticle maybe move in there a little bit. Obviously, you see in your point of impact downrange, you'll notice some fairly big differences, even if you go 1 or 2 clicks. But that actual distance that things are moving physically inside the scope is so small.
Yeah. You can have, we have one scope that we're working on right now where the overall travel is literally 1.5 millimeters.
Jeez.
Throughout the whole travel.
Yeah.
So the reticle, even though that equates to like 160 MOA in the scope, it's literally only moving about under 1.5 millimeters. Whereas on some of these longer scopes, 3 millimeters.
Yeah,
is the overall travel.
I mean, that is wild when you start thinking about that scale.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is. I mean, that is precision going on in there.
Well, it's funny too, like during the design phase of it, where you get so caught up in what you're doing, and so you're zoomed in on everything like that, and then you back out and you realize, well, maybe I got to reattack that because things are definitely smaller than I realized for a second there. But
when you're zoomed in 300 times,
and
this is huge. Look at that change. I mean, it's gigantic.
And that's when you get to the machinist phase that we were talking about earlier. So
but we have, there's the other ones. This is the this one you find in actually a number of our scopes. It's the what do we call this one again?
That's the rev stop.
Rev stop. That's right.
The
Rev stop zero system. And then of course, so what we're holding here, it's kind of interesting though, because you have 2 pieces that are actually external parts of the scope. You can take them out, you kind of zero, and then you set them back in the scope somehow. And then you also have ones that are integral to the elevation turret, like our RZR or our LTEC systems in the PST Gen 2 and the Razors. And those things, I mean, that's just where the complexity, I feel like, really, really ups the ante, so to speak. But
well, then in these two, you're getting a zero stop, but you're also getting a locking turret as well. So there's even more
you've added
on.
yet another mechanical thing. But that's a huge like reason for why these scopes are cool. I mean, when you upgrade from certain optics, one of the big things that people will ask when they're talking about a precision optic, a long range optic, they'll ask, how good's the optics? The turret's got to be good. It's got to have the right features. But a very, very notable thing is the zero stop these days, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the amount of engineering and hair pulling out time that we have, especially on these more complex turrets that have multiple features, it's a non-zero amount of time for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you even, like, off the top of your head, weight how much time you spend on turrets versus the rest of the scope? I mean, the optical system, I know, takes the optical engineers a fair amount of time, but
I would say it's definitely the most design-intensive aspect beyond the optical system for sure.
Especially if it's a really new concept or something.
Yeah, if it's a new concept with multiple features, trying to figure out how to get them in there with everything still working, and keeping the features from previous, because there's always something from a previous design that we want to carry over because it's just something, like the infinite zero, right?
Right.
I think we would get loads of phone calls and emails if we ever got rid of that, on the Razor line of scopes. People like to be able to get that perfect zero, not be stuck in between clicks.
Right. And then you're talking about, an extra layer of precision for the end user there too, But, I mean, that is what you're talking about there. It's so interesting to watch, essentially this zero stop evolution.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, the carryover, it's like, oh, we like that, we'll plug that in here. But like you were saying, Joe, but we've got an entirely new concept. So how do we fit that into this new concept?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways to skin the cat, and something that we haven't really talked about yet. But as far as a lot of times we'll get done with a cool concept or something like that, and we're like, well, how is the user experience going to be with that? And because we're trying to make something that's efficient, effective, ideally it's intuitive enough to where if you haven't touched your rifle for a year since last time you zeroed or whatever, you can come back to it and have no problem with zeroing your rifle and making sure that zero stop, you trust where that zero stop ended up.
Yeah, you're not like, where did I put that instruction manual?
It makes sense to people like Mark and myself. Mark, I know I wasn't at the time because I was, probably just some little annoying kid running around the shipping department. But you were one of the test subjects many times for the old Razor 5-20's zero stop system. I don't know how many iterations my brother Sam must have gone through with you, taking them over to your desk. I mean, Mark, can you work this?
Yeah, I was like that baseline litmus test, and we talked about this on a different podcast, but Sam, I just always think it's a funny story. Sam, was designing. He had a different version of actually a dramatically different version for the original Razor 5-20, and so we went in the back.
He loved it.
He did. And he's like, all right, Mark, just this is how you do it, set it. I'm like, okay, cool. Within like 10 seconds, like I dropped a screw, it went spitting across the floor, and I lost it. And I don't even know, I can't even recall if Sam even said anything. I think he just took everything and like walked away.
It's like,
and then I think he went turkey hunting. He was turkey. You'll have to ask Sam the exact story.
He was sitting in it. I thought it was out west, or maybe he was sitting in the stand. I know that,
he went hunting and like had like a zero stop epiphany, and like it was like over the weekend he had a completely new design.
Yeah,
it was amazing, and I think that's actually might be the design that we ended up going with. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I think somewhere around here we have that original design.
Sans one screw.
Yeah.
I've often been told I have a screw loose, Jim.
Well. Don't believe everything you hear, Mark.
Yeah.
But also don't disbelieve everything you hear. Then you come to the L-Tech Plus though over there. I remember when you guys were trying to come up with the next iteration of the L-Tech that's now in the 6-36. I'd come down to the engineering department and it'd be like, hey, how you guys doing on that zero stop for the Razor Gen 3? It'd be like, oh yeah, we're still working on it. Come down a couple months later. You guys got that yet? Oh no, still working on it. And I mean, it had to be right. And that thing is pretty cool. That's like the easiest to use zero stop ever.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I personally noticed over time. Over time, they have gotten easier. I don't think the design has gotten more simple, but setting the stop has become more user friendly and simple.
That's good to hear.
That's an accurate statement.
I mean, case in point, the LHT, that's a scope that I use a lot. That's we should probably lift some of these up. So that's this guy right here. So Light Hunter Tactical. It's got the Rev Stop Zero system. The first time I was handed this scope, in contrast to that original Razor 5-20, I didn't even have the directions. And I figured out how to set the zero stop.
The directions are written on the zero stop.
Essentially, yeah.
Put in, rotate to stop, done.
Right. Tighten again. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just like beautifully simple. Joe, I have no idea what it looks like necessarily on the inside or how many, months or years it took to get that going, but I do appreciate all the hard work.
So since we gave Sam some credit there, that zero stop was your brother Dave.
Yep.
No kidding.
Yep.
The Rev Stop one?
Yeah.
I remember the family birthday party we were at when he had that zero stop epiphany.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We were all about to eat some pie, and Dave goes, I've got an idea. And then we were all like, okay. And he goes, oh, it's a really easy zero stop. Hold on. Wait, where's my... And he grabs his iPad. I don't know where he pulled it out of. And then he was like, well, you do this, that. And Sam walks over, and they're both the engineers, and they're like, oh, yeah, actually, I think that would work. I don't see why that wouldn't work. That seems like, yeah, it would totally work. And then I think he went in... like over the weekend and we started like writing up the patent, and like it just happened like that.
Dude, that is so crazy, man.
Yeah. I don't know. I have yet to have my zero stop epiphany, but it seems like it's trickling its way down through the brothers.
It's like a rite of passage.
I will say you will probably get yours before Joe gets his.
Well, yeah, that's fair. That's probably true. But Joe will know how to sell it.
Yeah,
this is true.
But anyway, did you have anything else, Mark, that we missed on your zero stop sheet?
I'm trying to think. I mean, we talked about, setting stops. I mean, if we went into actually how to set all these stops, that would be, that'd be more of an instructional video or something like that.
Stops.
But, yeah, they're super cool. I mean, I might cap it off with, like I said, when we first started getting into, even when we started making scopes with zero stops, like I was still like super skeptical. I'm like, man, I don't know if you should be like adjusting, once you get that zero. And then I started using them, getting more comfortable. Like, oh, yeah, these things work. They're amazing. They've obviously gotten more amazing over time. Now, I don't like hunting with a scope that doesn't have one.
Absolutely.
Like, I feel like I'm undergunned. I mean, for not every type of hunt, but...
it's peace of mind.
Yep.
Right.
It's peace of mind. If you need to execute a long-range shot and you have good ballistic data and you're confident in your shooting, you've done some practicing, man, it's a nice little thing to have in your bag of tricks to be able to do that and be confident that you're going to be able to come back home, get to your zero, and then, like you said, we've got these locking turrets here, so if you're not going to inadvertently dial your scope and you're going to stay on that zero,
I'll tell you,
they're pretty cool, man.
I'll tell you what is the poor man's zero stop.
Which is?
I encountered it at the Vortex Extreme when I first learned that a proper zero stop is a very, very valuable tool. We were running those original Diamondback Tactical first focal planes. Great scope. Love that optic. Did not have a zero stop in it. And so what I had to do there, and I remember telling myself, I'll remember what I last dialed to. Well, then every time there's the self-doubt, you get the gun out and you're like, did I dial back to zero? But I remembered exactly how many revolutions it took to just bottom out the turret from my zero. So if I was ever in doubt, I'd just bottom the thing out, and I'd be like, oh, that means I'm 2 revs down for my zero. So as long as I passed zero 2 times or whatever it was, then I knew I was back to my zero. And that also goes to show you should have a scope that tracks well, because I literally ran that thing up and down over the course of an entire competition many, many times, half the time for shooting and half the time for actually figuring out where the heck I was in the travel. And it held freaking great the whole time. So that's the poor man's zero stop.
But you mentioned a big thing there, though, and that is that tracking. Like, you have to have a scope that obviously is going to track accurately if you are going to be running it up and down. And I know that is something that we've placed a high precedence on, really with all of our rifle scopes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to have it. I don't think any of us would feel comfortable selling anything that didn't.
No.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
We forgot kind of one feature. It's not really a zero stop feature, but it aids in your zero, and that's the rev indicator.
Yeah.
On the Gen 2 Razor and the Gen 3. So there's another layer of engineering in there to have this post that goes
Shows
in and
you what
out.
rev you're on. Yeah, because just like you were saying, being a rev off below, it's very easy to also be a rev high, which if I could have a choice between being a rev low or a rev high, I would choose a rev low every time.
Sure.
Because a rev high becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have no idea where that round's going. Exactly.
Yeah. But that rev indicator is almost like it's not a zero stop, but it's a little zero indicator on each rev.
Well,
cool.
Ironically, on the LTEC turrets, the rev indicator is also the zero stop.
Yep.
That I didn't know. How's that working?
The table is against the wall. Is that a code? Is Scott trying to tell me something?
Has the eagle landed? What's going on here? Joe, what's going on with that, real quick? Or
can you even say?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can get into
we
it. So basically, think there's a cam
blown
group.
past 20 minutes, as we suspected.
That's right.
Ryan can tighten it up.
So
I'm sure of it.
Whereas we were talking about earlier, where the shims were actually preventing translation of the turret, so they're bottom out. This is actually the zero stop, and here is the LTEC system involves a cam groove that is limiting rotations, the amount of rotations. So think of like a spiral on a metal component that is engaged with a pin. That pin is radially moving in and out, and so what's happening here as I dial is that pin's actually getting pushed out radially. And so once you hit the ends of the travel of that spiral or the cam groove in there, that's where you have like a mechanical stop.
Okay.
So that's what's happening. So you come all the way back down, and then there you impact the mechanical stop.
So you just figured out a way to use that pin for something other than just stopping the zero. You're like, well, hey, while it's doing that, it might as well bump out this little knob that also tells you what revolution you're on.
Yep.
Yeah, essentially, imagine the rev indicator is this pin moving out. There's just a pin sticking up. So
how about that?
And this is riding in the cam groove as you dial.
So, and that's just
genius.
like that's a secondary visual and tactile reference, potentially a low light setting or something like that, where you can just reach down and feel like and kind of know where you're at in your revs. So, very cool.
The same thing as your brother Sam again. The same thing that's in the LTEC. That part of this turret is the same. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
What the heck happened
with
What happened with Joe and me? We get that. That sounds cool.
At least it appeared you understood what Joe was saying. I just nodded.
Have these
Jim.
things pop up in your head.
Yeah, I was like, well, I trust you that is what's happening.
Right, radially, yes, correct.
Always good to end with some smart stuff. Gentlemen, appreciate you on here as we scratch the surface of zero stops. Jim, if you're out there and you have any more questions about zero stops, definitely ask. Let us know. If you've been using them, let us know how you like them.
Do tell. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
I was going to try to give you a plug in there, Jim, but Mark ended it. So
A plug?
Oh,
I haven't come up with anything.
Well, I think everybody just knows Jimmy as like the voice of Vortex and the face, but what people don't know is he also taught himself SolidWorks when he came back to college.
True.
And was going down that road and could have designed a zero stop and probably could still today if he really wanted to, if he could find the time.
I forgot about that, Jim. I
did have a brief stint in engineering. Well, now, and the thing is really what it was I knew how to make lines and then how to extrude them, and then I would quick run over to Dave or Mike Rosen and be like, hey, how do I do this? And then they go over and show me, like, cool, got it. I'd do that. I'd be like, yeah, I got a new skill. And then I'd be like, oh, how do I fill it? I'm going to have to go, hey, how do you do that fillet thing again? Yeah.
I think, what was it? Was it the Strike Eagle 1-6?
The reticle that's in the 1-8, I did. Or that was in the 1-8. I did that. And then the Eagle Optics very, very, very briefly had a binocular that I designed. I still have one on my desk. I can't remember if was it the EO Denali? And then I kind of had the start of the design for the mount that's on the Crossfire right now. And then Mike
Put some radius on
put
it.
a little,
Radius.
yeah.
That's awesome,
Put a little
Jim.
seasoning on it.
That's cool, man. That's fun stuff.